Hi, hello, and welcome everybody. So today we're going to be going over the free software called GIMP, which stands for GNU Image Manipulation Program. And basically, GIMP is the most popular and free version of Photoshop. It's a way to edit and manipulate images, add text, things like that. And if some of you have experience with Photoshop, maybe you do, we'll go over the ways in which it is similar and different and just how to do some basic things with the program. And to introduce myself, my name is Daisy Wiley. I am the Instruction and Outreach Support Specialist at Cornell University's Mann Library, which that title means that basically I do things like graphic design, I design things for events, workshops for the library, anything that librarians need support with, that kind of thing. So if you ever are in Mann Library, a lot of the graphics you see in there have been done by me. So I do have some experience with image manipulation and things like that. And also with us today we have Carl. You can introduce yourself, Carl.
My name is Carl Rosen. I am also at Mann Library. I'm the exhibits curator. I'm largely responsible for pretty much anything you've seen as a display item on the first floor of Mann Library for the last 5 or 6 years, both research and design-wise, which is how I fall into working with this type of program. So we'll start looking at things right away and just start going through. I'm going to share my screen with all of you, where yeah, this is the base of GIMP. Its interface is pretty standard, normal Windows program, or it also runs on Mac and Linux if you are looking to do either of those. Standard menus here for file, edit, various selections, help and contextual help, all very important. If you're going to use GIMP, you're going to wind up using these quite a lot. Its workflow is a little different than what a lot of people are used to. 3 real main areas. The first is this area of tools. These are different tools such as the move and alignment tool, different select tools, lasso select. And if you're clicking on these, if you hold the button down, you'll find that many of them have more than one tool that is available in that space. So the transform tool, you can use the unified transform or go down to all these different kinds of transformations. Then once you have selected a tool, this area below it shows a bunch of options that you might have for that tool. So the rotate tool, has different directions that it'll go into. You can have it show the preview. The clone stamping tool has different brush sizes that you can use, and these all adjust. You can either use the little the arrows, you can grab it and drag, or type in an absolute value. 1,000 pixels is pretty big. This then, of course, is the main area where you're going to have your work. If you're, that's where your image will be that you're working on. On the right-hand side is a couple of different things. At the top is an area that gives both, it's a number of tabs. This is a brush selection tab where you can change these different shapes of brushes. You can also import new brushes, design new brushes. You can do a lot of stuff with that. And then different, these are swatches of various color patterns that you can utilize instead of a straight color. Some font selection tools. Different gradients that can be applied, and a space where you can save a custom tool, which is really awesome. Below that is an area talking about layers and what layers you're working on. If you're not familiar with this type of software, a layer is basically like, if you're familiar with old style cell animation, where you have a background that's painted and then a clear sheet gets put on top of that with a piece of drawing on it, and then a piece of drawing on that. Each one of those pieces that goes on top is a layer, and they're treated completely separately from what's above and below it. Unless you can arrange them, you can merge them, different things. That's more or less the general layout here. Did you want to move forward, Daisy, go into what you were going to launch on next? Unless you want to add.
Yeah, so that I guess was a bit of a basic overview of the layout of GIMP, and I'll show basically how to, from here, like if you could stop screen sharing, Carl, and I'll take over, how to set up a file, and we'll just like go step by step through what, how to work in this program. Let me see. Okay, here we go. So I already have something open, so this is not quite what it would look like when you open it. But what you would do is, it's very, if you've worked in Photoshop or anything like that, it's pretty similar. You go to File, up in the top here, you go to New, and maybe it might look a little bit different if you're on a Mac, but basically the same layout. And so this is your little panel for creating a file. And you have a few things here. You can actually choose a template, which will give you a pre-assigned dimensions and resolution. So US letter is like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, like printer paper. And it'll show here like 8.5 inches wide, 11 inches high. And you can also like either judge that by pixels or inches. It really depends on, usually if I'm working on something in print, I'll work in inches. And if I'm working on something that will be viewed on the web, I'll work in pixels. So like, for example, if you were working on something that will be displayed on an LCD screen in the library, the usual size for that is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. And if you're doing that, you have your dimensions set here. Usually the second factor you'd have to think about is your resolution. And that is counted in pixels. Well, it's referred to a few ways. Pixels per inch, you'll hear it like PPI sometimes, or DPI, which means dots per inch. And that basically means if you have like a little inch square, that is how many pixels would be in that square. So right now it's at 300 pixels per inch, which is a higher resolution, and that's usually something you'd have for, if you're printing out, 300 is a good resolution. But if you're doing something for digital display, I'll usually go to 72 pixels per inch. I really don't know why in GIMP there's this little thing here where you can change resolution in each end, but you want to make sure that this is, this little chain here is connected so that it changes both. You want it to be the same in both of the boxes there. So let's say that what I'm doing right now, let's say that I'm going to be doing something that is the size of 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I want to print it out. So I'm going to have it at 300 pixels per inch, or PPI. So I have it here. You can also click this little tiny box here to make it landscape or vertical. So either way, I'm going to make it landscape for what I'm doing. And then you hit OK here, and it opens your new little work area. And this is something that you can go back and you can change it later. You're not like set with this, with these dimensions and with this resolution. And you can go back to change that in image. And then you can go to print size, which I believe in Photoshop, it's usually you go into image size, I think is what it is, or canvas size, but here it's print size. So this is where you can change the width and the height from inches, or you can go work in points, which is the same as pixels. And then you can change the resolution there. So it's not static. This is something you can go back in and mess with later. You can also mess with it when you're exporting, which is something Carl will talk more about. So now we have this set up, but we need to do something with it. You know, there's kind of this blank canvas here. So Carl is going to talk a little bit about actually getting things to put on here, and like how you get images and type, things like that. So take it away, Carl. It's your turn.
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to touch on, because of the nature of what we're working with, GIMP is what's known as free and open source software. So there is no copyright with it. There's no restrictions with it. You can do whatever you like. There's no, if you want to start redesigning it and write code for it, feel free to do so. And we want to help the ideas of copyright and open sourceness are an important aspect of using GIMP. So one of the things we wanted to highlight a little bit is the idea of free software and copyright and licensing. So one of the documents that's in the shared folders that we have is a list I put together of both some sources to get typefaces, fonts, which are really something that people often forget are licensed and not available all the time for public work if they're going out for things on the to grab stuff off of the internet to use for presentation software. There's a group of licensing that is commonly used for this type of software. Licensing always has to do with distribution and attribution and modification. So anything that you find that is there are really sort of 4 very common licenses you'll find. The Creative Commons license, which has a number of variations as to what you can use with it. The most common being attribution and free distribution. The new public license is another one you'll run into. That's very common. A few less common ones. I have links to all of the different licenses in this specific document. But let's look at some. Another thing that I like to do is, if we're going to be doing some searching for an image to use, share screen. So if we look at this, I've been looking for butterflies. But if we're in the Google, in the Google image search, okay. We can do a search, and under images, there is this option for tools, which has usage rights. Now, we can look for Creative Commons licenses off of any of these images. So this gorgeous blue butterfly image is supposed to have a Creative Commons license. So if we go to the license to the place where it's coming from, this is a bad example. I apologize. Okay, so this is on Wikipedia. Wikipedia almost always has a Creative Commons license. Yep. Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0. So that means that you can use this image as long as you give credit to the person who took it, which is in this block here of where it comes from. Then From there, I apologize. I'm rambling a little bit. Another.
Well, do you want me to try and
yeah, why don't you?
It's really good for fair use because it's super complicated too. There's a link, right?
Yeah,
to
there's a
on that document to like a Cornell site that talks about fair use that you can run.
Yeah, this is the Cornell University Library Copyright Information Center, and they have a bunch of tools there for determining what is fair use. Fair use is the idea that you don't need to have copyright on something, that you can use something that's under copyright under limited circumstances. The most common being educational purposes or review or satire. Almost always we're going to be using them under educational purposes, but you can't just do it willy-nilly. You need to think about what you're doing and have good purpose put together. And there's a number of resources at that link for helping someone determine whether or not they're going to be within fair use, because it is not entirely a case-by-case basis. There's no hard and fast set of rules for it, which is what makes it very complicated.
Yeah, so just run through that whenever you
find so if you're
because you can actually get for using something.
Yeah, there have been some issues at Cornell over the years of people grabbing things without having proper rights to it. It becomes a very big issue for everyone involved, not just the lawyers. But anyway, once we sourced an image, Daisy, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah, I'll go over and I'll show you like how to, let me see, share screen. Okay, so let's say, well, here's like Pixabay where I went earlier to like find some images, and here's one that I found, and I have like a little folder here with some images. And so I have this document that we set up. This is something I made earlier just to see like, you know, the kind of stuff you can make in here. So it's like a little butterfly from that Cornell Rare and Distinctive Collections folder that I sent. And then like some other stuff I found, and I kind of stuck it together. So I can go over like how I made this. And so this is our little panel that we set up earlier. And now we have like this folder of images here that are all fine to use. They're all fair use. And so what I'm going to do is there's a couple ways to bring something in here. You can right click and then hit open in GIMP, or the easy way to do it is to just drag it in. And now you have that there. So now that I have this, it kind of went onto its own layer. Like you can see there's the background here, and then this created its own layer. So I can click on it, selected, you know, like it's not exactly the size I want it to be. There's this white space here. So there's a few ways you can mess with this image now that you have it in here. And most of those ways to alter an image are in this little section here. And you have a scale tool, or if you right click, you can select something else. You can rotate it, things like that. So right now I'm just going to select the scale, and I go to the corner, kind of drag up, and it's bigger now. And if I want to move it, I have to go back to this little arrow thing here and move it like that. And scale, move. So those are like the basic ways to mess around with an image. And let's say, you know, I have this, and I also want to have this little pencil here. So I'm going to drag that in. And this is actually, this is a PNG file, which means that it can have a transparent background. So that's why this looks like it's kind of floating here. But I can show you how to remove, or I will show you how to remove the background from an image as well. But this was something I found online that already was like this, luckily. So I don't have to do it with this one. And I'm going to scale this down some using that scale tool. Then I'm going to right click. And how I'm scaling it again is I am going to the corner and dragging. That's still a little big. Okay, then right click and then go to rotate, because I think it could be at a better angle. And this is again dragging and kind of turning. And you'll have to, if you want to move it, like you'll have to get off of this tool, because all it will do is rotate the image. So you'll have to go back to here, which is your basic move tool. And then you can move this. Oops, sometimes you accidentally move other things, so you have to be careful. But what you can do actually in GIMP, like in Photoshop, you can hit Control-Z on your keyboard, which will undo something. Or which, if you go to edit, it's there's an undo as well. But I like keyboard shortcuts. It makes it a lot easier. So I have that there. Now I'm going to also drag in this butterfly. And sometimes it'll give you a weird little message about color profiles. Just, I ignore it. So bring that in. I'm going to rotate it and scale it as well. Is there a question in the chat? I guess, are you keeping an eye on that, Carl? I hope people are doing okay right now. I know this is a little complicated. But basically I'm just like adjusting this because I want it to look like, what I'm doing is I want it to look like it's on the piece of paper. So I'm getting it in the right place right now, and then I'll show you how to get rid of the background on this as well. So just again, using those rotate and scale tools and dragging until it is how I want it to be, and the move tool just to move it around to the right place. So we have that there now. I think those were all the images I was bringing in for this, yeah. But I mean, you can do whatever you want. All of these images, by the way, were from that box folder I sent. I put them all up there. This was from the special collections folder, and these other things I just like found online that are fair use. And so they all right now, when I drag them in, automatically go onto their own layer. So if you want to see what's behind it, you can like hit this little eyeball here and it will go invisible. So right now, like I want to get rid of this pencil because that's in my way. So what I'm gonna do, and this is another keyboard shortcut, I'm doing Shift+ to zoom in. And the way, if you're working in Photoshop, the way you usually would do that, I think it's Control+. And to move around, you can also have a shortcut where you press the space bar and then move your mouse, and that will move you around. So I am right now zooming in on this so that I can get rid of this little pencil here, because I don't want it there. So I am going to go to this little clone tool, which is in Photoshop as well. It's pretty great. It's basically a way to take part of an image and stamp it or transpose it onto another part of the image. And the way you do that is you hit Control to choose where you want to take from, and it will make a little circle there. And then if you click on what you want to cover up, it'll cover it up with what was in that circle. So I'm doing it again to slowly kind of erase this. And this is a really like quick and easy tool that I use a lot. So now that's gone. Pretty cool. I'm going to zoom out a little. To zoom out, you just hit minus. And so we have that. And let's work with this butterfly image, which we want to make it look like it's on the piece of paper. So we want to get rid of the background. And this is like one of the most common things I find people wanting to learn with Photoshop or GIMP or whatever program it is how to get rid of backgrounds on images. And it can be pretty simple if you have the right kind of image. Like this image has a background that's pretty much all white. So you want a lot of contrast to have an image that is easy to cut out of the background. If it's something that has a really busy background or a lot going on in it, it's going to be more work, and you can do it. It's just going to take a lot longer. And it's going to be a lot of like cutting the image out by hand. But you know, if you have this image here and you want to just erase the background, technically you can just take your, oops, I'm on the wrong layer. You want to make sure that you have this layer selected first. you can just take this eraser and you can go around and you can erase it. But there's a couple problems with that. One, it erases the layer and you can't go back and save any of it. So let's say I accidentally like cut off a little bit of that and I didn't want to cut off that piece of the leaf. So I'm going to undo that with Control Z and just find another way to do it, because we don't want to get rid of any of the image. We want to be able to bring it back later if we need. So the way to deal with that is to make a layer mask. And you have this image selected and you hit this, like there's a little mask icon there. And it literally adds like this other, it's like a layer within a layer kind of. So hit add and you'll see it show up there. And this is just a way that you can get rid of parts of this image and then add them on later without having to actually alter the original image. So I'll show you what I mean. Like you have this little paintbrush here and it operates in a basic way. Like this is basically like a white canvas. And then if you have click your paintbrush and you want to make sure that the color is black, which is something you determine by clicking here on this little foreground color palette and selecting the color, hit OK. And then if you go click on your layer mask, you want to make sure you're clicking on your layer mask, because if you click on the layer, you're just painting on top of the layer and that's no good. But if you click on the layer mask, then you can go in and actually like paint around it. And that's good because you can also then, if you switch and then paint over it in white, you can fill that back in. But so that's a really great way to like make sure that you're preserving the image. But the thing is, if we were to go in and just paint this whole thing, it looks kind of like blobby. It doesn't look very good. Like, I mean, it works, but it's not super pretty. So we can do this another way, actually. Like we're still using the layer mask, but we're like selecting the area that we want to get rid of in a different way. So if there's an image like this that has a really good, clean white background, and you can kind of go in and like use this tool that I believe in Photoshop, it's called the magic wand. In GIMP, it's called fuzzy select. And you can go in and click on the color or the area that you want to get rid of, and it will kind of guess what that is. And you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit, that it's selected, like when I clicked here, it selected this area and it selected some of the white in here because I guess it was similar enough, but it mostly guessed like what it needed to select. I don't think besides that one area there was anything left out. So fuzzy select is a good way to like be able to select something without having to go in and do it all by hand. So again, when I did that, I made sure that I was on this layer because we are selecting from this actual image here. And then you can click on your layer mask layer. And now that you have this selected, you can go to your paintbrush and start filling in the area that you selected. And maybe there's some pieces that didn't get selected like this. And like, usually I'll just, do what I can. Like it got enough of it, I can go in later and fill in those little pieces in another way, which I'll show you. So you're just erasing this. And it obviously didn't get that little part in the flower. So I'll show you how to work around that, because if I were to go in and fill that in, it would erase it, and I don't want that. So Control Z to get rid of that. So I can show you how, besides like maybe going in carefully around it and like very carefully trying to not fill that in, I can show you another way to actually select that area. So, okay, so I'm just not going to go near that and try and fill it in. I'll show you how to get rid of it. So we are here and it's selected right now, but we want to deselect it. So we're going to this little thing right here called rectangle select, and you just click somewhere else. You don't want to make an actual rectangle, so don't drag, but just click. And so now nothing is selected. So there's a few things you could do. The easiest thing to do, I think, is to go in to this tool here called Free Select. And you just kind of slowly make your own selections. So I'm kind of going around the area that I want to get rid of and highlighting it. Is this okay? Are there a lot of questions coming in, Carl? How are we doing?
We're doing pretty well. It's just really just answering the question about how to move layers around.
Okay.
All good.
Thanks. So this is something you could get really precise with. You could just, it depends, like if it's something you want to be really clean, you could go in and like try really hard to make sure it's super accurate. It just depends on the image. But basically I am selecting the whole area I want to get rid of. And then when you get to the very end of it, you want to make sure that you close the selection. So you go back to where you originally were and hit it. And usually it'll be like this little orange thing there that you'll see that will mean that you're closing the selection. So now you have all of this selected. And then that means you can go in with your paintbrush and make sure again that your layer mask layer is selected and fill that in. And then deselect by going to your rectangular select tool and clicking somewhere else. And I'm zooming out with shift or with minus, the minus sign. So I have that. That's pretty much all cut out. There's these little pieces here that I can go in and just with the paintbrush tool kind of fill in by hand. But that's pretty much it. That whole thing is cut out now. I believe, yeah, that's all of it. So that's like an image that's a little easier to work with. Again, like, so when you're looking for images that you want to maybe cut out and have be this thing that you can kind of move around and oops, I accidentally moved. Like that's another weird thing that happens when you have layer mask selected instead of the image.
So talking about layer mask selection, there's a question about just re-demonstrate how to make sure you have the layer mask selected.
So you
click it's here. Very small.
Yeah, it is tiny. And that's the one thing about GIMP that's a little annoying too, is like sometimes these little icons are very small, but I mean, I guess that's what happens when you're using something for free. It's usually not perfect, but this right here on the left is your image. And then if you click to the right of it, that is the layer mask. So there's two little rectangles next to one another. The one on the right is the layer mask. The one on the left is the original image. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Is there anything besides left and right that you can describe visually against just tiny on the screen share? Like, is one of them have a certain appearance and one of them have another appearance?
I mean, if you can see them larger, they might be larger on your screen. My screen's like really high resolution, so everything looks even smaller than usual. But the one on the right will kind of look like, it will originally, when you first make a layer mask, it will just look like a white rectangle. When you start working on it, it will probably look like a white rectangle with some like black lines on it.
One of them is an approximation of the image that you have on that layer.
Yeah.
And the other one is less than that.
Yeah,
it's
so
sort of hard. It's hard to describe without. So like, yeah.
Yeah, if I could zoom in on this and blow it up, this would look like a little version of this butterfly image. It's just
right. If you can see, like what I can see, like there's a sort of there's a rectangle of the icon, and then inside that there's a little white rectangle that's sort of canted a little bit. That's mimicking the white rectangle that's turned of the notebook image there.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that one is not the mask.
That is not the mask. That is the image. The one to the right of that is the mask. The actual image will always be in that sort of like left column. There's an eyeball. There's a little space next to that, and then the one right after that is the actual image of that layer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
And again, the way to make a layer mask is when you have your layer selected, you go to this bottom little panel here and click the mask. It's like a little mask floating over a rectangle.
And then there is a question about wanting to do the reverse if you want to erase the butterfly instead of the area around the butterfly.
Mm.
One thing that you can do is you can use the fuzzy select to select all of the white areas, and then either under the select menu or with a control I, there's invert. That inverts the selection so that now instead of selecting all the white, you're selecting everything that's not that white.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
So
you can do that.
yeah. So let's use the example then of.
Awesome. Glad I could answer that for you.
Yeah. So if you were to select this notepad, for example, this is all selected. And see, now it's like this little white area is selected. So you then go to select, invert, and now this area, everything that is not this notepad is selected. So that is, yeah, that's what Carl was talking about. And that's a really helpful tool.
Yeah. So get more questions, keep them coming. Daisy, by all means.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, those are some basic ways to isolate something or to remove part of it. And that's, again, with the layer mask, something you can go back and mess with more. So now we have these images here. And this pencil, like I'm kind of wanting, what I was doing with this, I wanted the pencil to kind of look like it was drawing this butterfly. But right now, obviously, it's in the wrong place. Like it's behind this. It's kind of obviously getting covered by it. So I'm going to drag it up so that it is above this butterfly layer. So now this is the top layer and it's covering it. So that is what I wanted. A couple other things you can do with images. Now that we have these in here, we went over like how to remove things from their background or remove certain parts of images, how to rotate, scale them, things like that. So another good thing that you can do in GIMP is you can mess with colors and things like that. So let's say I wanted this pencil to be a different color, for example. So another way to use the fuzzy select tool that can be helpful is, let's say if I wanted to change the color of this pencil, I could go into colors and then go to color balance and kind of mess with it here. But you can see that changes everything and it can make it look really funky really easily. So I just want to change this green part of it. So what I can do with fuzzy select is, if it will let me zoom in. Oh yeah, it will usually only let you zoom using the keyboard controls if you have this little select tool selected. So what I'm going to do is go in with this, click here on what I want to select, and then hold down Shift to add more to the selection until I have everything that I want to change. I want to make this green like an orange color. So now that that's selected, I go into colors. There's a few ways to change it. I usually do color palettes and then just, this changes the amount of cyan versus red in something. So if you go towards red, it makes it more red. If you go toward, and then there's also magenta and green, it can make it more magenta, more green. You want to be slow with these because it can really quickly just make it look like really blown out and strange. So just don't go like too much to the right or left unless you want it to look like that. So this is like the color I think I want it to be. So I'm going to hit OK. And then this is still selected. So I'll go to my little rectangle tool and click somewhere else. So now we have a different colored pencil. Awesome. I can go over that as well with like this butterfly. Let's say we want the butterfly a different color, but it's difficult to maybe select like this whole thing without like with the fuzzy select tool because there's a lot going on there. So I'm going to like by hand kind of vaguely go around it. And like the cool thing is now that it's cut out, like I'm using my lasso tool to trace the butterfly right now. That's what I'm doing. You don't have to worry about the background. I can like in the areas that I'm just trying to avoid the green areas because I don't want to alter those colors. But when I get to this area here, I can just kind of more vaguely trace the outline of it. I I'm not going to make it super precise because this doesn't need to be super precise. It's fine for the purposes of this. But basically, I'm just trying to select just the butterfly's wings and its body there. And you want to make sure, again, you close that lasso. So now this is selected. And I want to make sure that I'm on the butterfly layer and have the layer image selected, not the mask. So there's some ways to mess with the color here. I'll go to color balance again. I think I'll make it like a little more yellow. And again, you can see it does, like, this isn't the best color balance tool. I feel like Photoshop's is more accurate. I don't know why it looks like this a lot of the time, but it's just, it's a little funky. But you can get it to work sometimes and like do at least a little bit of what you want. So right now it's like really saturated, but I did get it to be like a little more, oops, we do not want that. A little more yellowy, which is what I wanted. So now that it's like that, I can go in and actually make it look less saturated. And I went into hue/saturation. I can turn the saturation down. I can also mess with the hue, but that's another thing that can be a little funky. Hit OK. I kind of like that. Maybe I'll also go into colors and look at color temperature. That means like you can make it warmer temperature or cooler. I'm going to make it a little cooler. Hit OK. These are just things that like you can kind of combine them all and just see what it looks like. It's really like I suggest just messing around with them because a lot of the times these don't do exactly what you think they would do, or like maybe it looks better with a combination of a few different color adjustments. But yeah, these are just something you can have some fun with. So now I have like a more kind of yellowy-ish butterfly. I'm wondering how it turned out on the one I did earlier. Oh, it's sort of similar. I think that one looks a little better. Okay, so we have that. And what else do we want to do here?
Sorry, Eveline here. Daisy, there was a question about somebody's hearing you're clicking your sound and just wanting to confirm what your hand was doing on the mouse or the trackpad. If she's, you know, what was the clicking? You were actually sort of tracing with the what do you call it? What was that tool? The lasso tool. Yeah, that's right. So how?
Well, there was a few things. I have a mouse here that I'm using instead of my trackpad. And when you're tracing something with the lasso, like I'm clicking every once in a while to like make a new point so that I can, because if I were to just so your lasso shape is built up of different connectors. And the more you click, the more little connectors you make, the more detailed the shape is going to be. So each time I click, you can see like a little circle is showing up. And I could zoom in even more and like be really precise with it and trace it really well. Or I could just kind of, you know, make it a little more vague. It just depends on like what I'm going for and like how much time I have, how much I care about the image. And when you get to the end of it, you click at the very beginning to close the lasso shape. And this is obviously not, I didn't do the whole thing, but that was just like for the purpose of showing you how it basically works. And when it's closed, you'll see like a little dotted line moving there, which means that it is selected and closed. Does that make sense? Was that what the person was asking?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, great. And again, I just went to the rectangular selection tool and clicked somewhere else so that that's not selected anymore. Anything else for working with images? I mean, there's also a crop tool, like say that this whole thing is too big. I wanted to get rid of some of the background. I can go to this crop tool here and kind of drag and select what I want. And then I go back to this little tool here and it crops it. Or I'm hitting Control Z to undo. You can also go to canvas size and change the canvas size there so that maybe I want it to be less wide. I can do that and it will crop off part of the image there. But those are some basics for working with images. There's some other tools that Carl can go over, and then I'll talk about working with text some. Does anybody have any more questions about any of this that I did here? Or want me to go over something again?
One thing I do want to, there's a question in the chat about being red-green colorblind and not being able to necessarily rely on looking at something to know that it's right. There aren't a ton of good answers for you on that, other than getting actual color values for what you're looking for. Like I'm going to put a site in the chat for you real quick that I use from time to time. This has a whole list of different specific colors by their names that are used in different spaces with both hexadecimal values and red, green, blue color values for them. So if you know that you need, if you're looking for a pale violet red, that's going to be an RGB of 219, 112, 147. And you'll know that that is specific color is what you're specifically targeting. How to help you identify colors, I don't have the expertise for that. But there are ways to know specifically what colors you are exactly looking for. I hope that helps you some. Otherwise, I'm not sure exactly where to point you. If somebody has a good idea where to point someone like that to get good color ideas, I'd love to know so I can present it forward.
There are some sites that, at least for color palettes, help you choose colors that would look good with colors you already have. And you can like plug one existing color into it and it'll give you all these other suggestions. So I think Colors with 2 O's is one of those sites that's helpful that I use sometimes for making palettes. That's all I can think of really. But yeah, we could, if I think of anything by the end, I'll add that in.
Please, thank you.
You want to go over some more tools, Carl?
Yeah, let's talk about a few things. I've got some more things here. One thing that I was looking at the layer arrangements when Daisy was doing them. Something that is really, really helpful is this layer lock. If you look in this second column, you click it, there's a chain. When it's unclicked, I can slide this background around. If I click it and select something else, okay, this just worked. All right, never mind then. But you can lock these, I know that. Whatever, okay. One of the tools that is actually the hardest thing to use in GIMP, where they are, is a lot of you probably have been thinking about like a pen tool and how to just make lines, which is harder than it would seem to be. You use this thing called the path tool, which just creates a path, and then if you don't do anything with that, it just kind of ceases to exist. But if you want to draw a straight line like that, you put on there and say stroke the path, which puts a pen stroke to it. And now you have an actual line, which, see, yeah, as Daisy said, this program is far from perfect. There's a lot of things to it that need a lot of a little bit of work. Yeah. Yeah. Started showing some of these other tools.
I may have gone over some extra things and then taken accidentally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if there's nothing else noteworthy, let me know.
Yeah, let's. I think I actually covered a lot of what I was going to talk about in this area, so that's totally fine. We'll go ahead and move forward.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about text now. I think in that box folder there are some font or typefaces that were sent that I put in there that I think are good typefaces to use. Like they're pretty. There's some that are meant more for headers, some that are or maybe called display fonts. Some that you can use for pretty much anything and can be legible at smaller sizes. So those are ones I check out. There's also the font can have some okay fonts. Google Fonts is really good. You can download fonts there. But once you have those, or you can just use anything that's on your computer, that's just if you want something extra, you can add text onto your panel. Now, it's not, in GIMP, it's not like the best place to work with text, but you can do some things. And there's like some ways you can find little like workarounds. But basically, oops, I'll undo that because I didn't explain what I was doing. So you have this little type tool here, this little A, and this is where you can add type into your project. So what you would do is you would click and drag, and it makes a little type box. And then when you have your box there, you just start typing. And it'll show up at whatever size was used last, but you can change that. Like how you change it is you can't just go in here and like change the type size. Like that'll change it'll like show a number changing, but it won't actually change the type unless you triple click to have it selected. You can tell it's selected when you see like a little yellow box appear around each letter. And then you can either here in this little type tool that shows up floating above the type, you can change the size, or which I'm doing just by clicking the little up arrow, or you can type in a size here if you select it and say like, I want it to be 175 pixels or whatever you want. So now I think that's a decent size. And I can also go here to the left, or here, actually it's this little, I don't know why. It's here in this tiny little box, but you have to click on that tiny little box and then you can scroll through your fonts. Ooh, that's hideous. I'm a designer, so I'm a little picky about fonts. But you can scroll through and kind of select what you want. I'm going to go with this one. I think that's pretty. And I'm going to make it a little bigger. So I think that's big enough. And again, if you're just doing that without having this selected, it won't do anything, but you want to triple click so that each of those letters is selected. You can also change the color in this little box here, which right now it's black, which means the type is also going to be black. You can go here, and there isn't a preview option in Photoshop. You'll see like, it'll sometimes while you're changing the color, this will show up as the color you're selecting, but in GIMP it doesn't work out like that, that I know of at least. So instead it will show the color that you are trying to get here in this little box. So right now it's this red color, and you can change it by sliding this little bar here or sliding all these bars until you get something you like. And I want kind of a green color. I want it more bluish green. So I'm sliding this B for blue. And there's also, I wonder, like sometimes there's, you can find like, I don't know if that was the link you sent, Carl, that had like colors online that had their color codes, but this is like a color code that sometimes you can like copy and paste it in there. So you don't really have to like, if it's,
when this is HTML notation, that's hexadecimal. So so it's, 0 to 9 plus A through F is what the digits go in there.
So if you found a color on there you wanted to use, you could copy and paste it in here and it would put that color in instead of having to like do it by eye. If there are like red, whatever kind of color blindness issues you're having. So that makes it a little easier. So now I have this, it's a nice green color. There's like some things you can do that in Photoshop it would be easy. Like if I wanted to add a stroke to this, it would be a little simpler to go in and just add a stroke, but there's some workarounds you have to do in GIMP. But I'll show you those, at least a couple. Like now that I have this here, first I'll show you how to move it. So let's say I want it more to the right. So these little things, these little yellow rectangles will show up whenever you're, whenever you go to the side of your box, and you can expand it, like push it this way or push it down, whatever you want to do. And that changes the size of the box. Or if you go to your select tool here, I accidentally moved the background. That's something that will happen sometimes. You can click on this and just move it around. So now we have this and we want to add a stroke to it. So what you do, it's a little weird. It can take a little bit to remember. So there's also tutorials on this online if you forget. But what you do is you select all this and then you right click and then you click path from text. And so that creates a path. And it's hidden right now. Like you're not seeing the path, but it is there. Just trust me. Whenever you do that, there is a path that when you hit new layer right here in the bottom, let me plug my computer in. Hit new layer, hit OK. And now if you go to this new layer here, which, oops, it's titled that for some reason. I'm going to call it text outline, which you can rename your layer by triple clicking and highlighting. So now we have this new layer here, and what we're going to do is, oops, I believe it's, there's a couple ways to do this. So your paths sometimes will show up in this little area here. And so you can hit this little eyeball and it will make the path visible. And then it'll make it invisible when you click that again. But the way to fill it now is, I did this earlier. I swear, how did I do it? Okay. You go to tools, fill. Oh yeah, you go to select. And then you've got from path. And what that will do, it will select your last path. And now you can see it's like there's the little moving lines around it. It's selected, but it's the same size as the text that I put there before. So I want it to be a little bigger since I want it to be an outline. So I'll go to grow here, which grows the selection by however much you want it to be. Like I could make it, I think I'll make it 10 pixels, which will make a pretty thick line around the text, and I'll hit OK. You can see your selection is now bigger than it was before. And using this little bucket here, you can then click there and it will fill in your selection. I had it selected black. You can fill it in whatever color you want, but I want a black outline for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect with the rectangular selection tool and then the thing is, this is in front of the text I had before. So what I'm going to do is drag it behind the text. Now you can see there's an outline to your text. It's a little complicated, but that's how you get an outline. There's also some other simpler things you can do, like to make your text stand out. Like you can go to filters, and there's this light and shadow panel here, and then you can go to drop shadow. And what this will do is you want to make sure preview is selected so you can see what you're doing. It can change the direction the shadow is coming from, make it more or less opaque, make it blur more or less. There's all these different things like this. We'll just make a bigger shadow. I want it to kind of be coming from up there. So this will, change the light direction. Actually, yeah, I think that's nice. You just kind of can mess around with it. Want it to be a little more opaque, which means like more or less transparent, I guess is another way to say it. So I'm going to hit OK. And now I have this text that there's an outline, which I can hide or show with the little eye icon there. There's an outline and a shadow to it. So those are some of the most basic things you can do to make your text stand out. There's a couple other things which are complicated, but I know one thing people often want to do is like type on a path. So again, you can use this weird path tool here, which is very counterintuitive and messy, but you can click to make one anchor point, click again to make another, and make a third, make whatever shape you want. I'm undoing that because I think that did not look great, but okay, I'm just going to make a little kind of arch there. So we have this little arch, and because I want my type to be going along that line. So I go to my, I believe it's tools. No, I go to, oh yeah, okay. So I have my path and I need text. So the way you have to do this is you have to first make your text, and you have to make it in a regular type box. And I'm going to write type along path, write whatever you want, but that's just so that you can know what it is I'm doing. And I'm going to make it however big I want it to be. I want it to be like 170 pixels. I want it to be white. You can change the color. Okay, so that's the type that I want to be on the path. But to get it to be on the actual path, you have to first make it here. So it's like its own little thing, but you're going to kind of like copy it onto the path. So the way you do that is I'm going to make a new layer. Okay. And then I'm going to go to this path here. And I did this earlier too. And of course, like this is just, I'm so used to working in Photoshop that I'm completely forgetting these things. The way you do this is once you have this text here, go to your little path thing, which is next to your layers. It's on the very right. You want to make sure that the path you made is selected. And then when you have that selected, you'll go to your type and then right click text along path. And when I did that, it started showing, like you'll see it selected here in red. Oops, I did not zoom in. I just kind of clicked on something else. So I'm trying to zoom in right now to show you. So it shows it selected there in red. So you have that. And then now that you have that text on the path you want it to be on, and is there a question coming in? Oh yeah, right click. How do you right click on a trackpad?
Is that command click? Neither one of us are really Mac users.
Yeah, I believe it is something on the left. So like it's either control.
It's either control or command click. It turns into a right click for a single button Mac.
And now that you're on Now that you have this little thing select or type on your path selected, you want to go to your new layer, right click, and then go to select from path. And you'll see those little moving lines again. And then you can go to your fill and you can fill it. Then deselect that. So, and you'll see it's still like it'll have red lines around whatever your path is that's selected, but you can just hide that by like clicking the little eyeball icon in your path section. So I'm going to hide this because we don't need that. We have it where we wanted. We wanted this little curves text here. And I want it to kind of, I'm going to move it. I'm going to like scale it up a little bit. But there we go. That is typing along a path, and then you can just move it around wherever you want. Oops. And be careful not to move your other layers. And rotate it, do whatever you want with it. Are there some questions coming through? Let's see.
Just discussing right-clicking on a Mac.
So Carl is going to go over how, now that you have this image, it's all nice and finished, Carl is going to go over how you can export your image and get it into whatever other format you need. So take it away, Carl.
We've got about 20 minutes to go on our time frame, so I'm just going to jump quick into talking about what to do at the end of the day when you're done with your image and you want to save it and put it out for something else, which involves normally it's going to be exporting a file. So I'm just going to pop on for here. This is an image. Normally, if you go to save a file in GIMP, it's going to default to a format called XCF. I'm uncertain exactly what that stands for, but it is roughly the equivalent of a Photoshop PSD, where it's taking the entirety of the information that you've applied to that image and storing it in a place where it has all the layer information and all the different ways that you've attacked that image. Normally, you're not going to be putting that out into a presentation or on the web or anything like that. You're going to use a different format, in which case GIMP utilizes, you have to export that. So we can put this out as a PNG, which is reportable network graphic, which has, if we're going to do this image that I just slapped together randomly, and then we export it. So it gives us a bunch of different options. We can have different interlacing, and various data can be saved into it or not saved into it. Like EXIF data is the information from a photograph that you take that has like its geolocation data and what camera it was taken on. So if you don't want that stuff to go out onto an image, you can have it removed by GIMP. Save now, and then we export that, and that goes out to our file system where we can just pick it up. Alternatively, there,
So sorry, Carl. So you cannot save as you can't just flatten a file and save it as a JPEG or in a PNG. That does not work in GIMP.
Correct. If you go to save, your choice is to save in XCF. This is actually also true about Photoshop by and large. If you just hit save, Photoshop saves it as a PSD.
Can you flatten the file though and save as JPEG?
I do not believe so. All right, we get this layers. Layers.
What was the question
Yeah.
again?
Whether you can flatten the file and save it as a
Flatten
JPEG.
and just save as.
I mean, you can export it as a JPEG.
You can export it as JPEG.
You can export it as a JPEG. Okay. All right. Okay. So that's how you would get it as an. Okay.
Yeah. So
Right.
it's the export dialog.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it'll show like the file types you can save as there,
Okay.
and you select JPEG.
Okay.
Yeah, you can absolutely export as a JPEG. So that that's pretty much how you the sort of like the life cycle of start to finish on working in GIMP. All right, well then, yeah, thank you all for coming.
Have a wonderful day.